So, hi, Clémence McNulty. I am a partner with EY and I lead our sustainability and climate change practice for Africa.
And good morning. I'm Sean, also partner from EY, senior partner in the technology practice, deep passion for value from data.
What does ESG mean?
So really for us, ESG with our clients starts with understanding what is material, what is important to those stakeholders, whether they be investors, customers or employees, and then framing your agenda around ESG, around those kind of stakeholder expectations. So that's really your starting point.
What impact do we see digital actually having now in next 5 to 10 years, specifically in South Africa, within your industry? What are some of the standout points, key factors that you say, this is the impact that digital and tech are having, and this is what you see ESG fusing with tech would come out?
Yeah, so one of the core requirements of ESG is to have the data to inform the right decisions and making sure that you're doing the right impact on societies you're impacting. And Clémence and myself work very closely together to understand the intent, the strategy, the outcomes you want to achieve. And really making sure that you then understand the data supporting that. Something as simple as the emissions in the car you drive that's got a data point, or the emissions from a factory. Or even this conference when we're talking about supply chain and logistics, those are the trucks and the warehouses. So how do we make sure that we've got a real balanced and pragmatic approach to make sure that the data makes the right decisions on the right one?
Fantastic. And then on your side, Clémence, specifically with weather and climate change, do you find that in the workplace, the communication from, let's say, top-level management to the communication or the understanding with middle management all the way down amongst the different departments within an organization, how is climate change understood? Is it just one message, or do you find that it varies per department?
I think there's still huge variation in terms of people's understandings of climate change, and certainly, different levels of the organization, different priorities, but also across organizations, across sectors, you find very different understandings and even different functions within the organization. For supply chain, it might be all about decarbonization and, let's say, managing sort of for climate resilience so that you don't have big disruptions, whereas in HR it's about how do we bring the right skills so people can actually manage these issues. So there is a level of alignment that's still required, but I think there's been a lot of progress over the last couple of years, and that's mainly due to, I think, people realizing that energy is not just going to come at any time in a South African environment, and then also starting to see the impacts of climate change, actually impacting business with the floods or with some of the things that we've seen in the last couple of years.
Just take it a step further, Clémence. Often organizations get the whole ESG component, of which climate is one of them, as a tick the box in the senior management exercise. And I think where you truly drive change is when you actually get the whole organization to worry about it, right? And it's got to be down to the warehouse staff who cares about the wastage. So one of the biggest things is how you drive the organizational change across the value in a way that truly drives kind of a sustainable outcome.
Yeah.
What role do you see tech and digital playing, specifically when it comes to issues of climate change and ESG?
Tech as a whole is a very power-heavy industry. And how do we ensure that as an industry, the impact that the industry has in society is managed? And what you started to see is a massive push for all the major tech companies to move towards carbon neutral. So that's the first component. You also started to see a lot of sustainable practices coming up. Microsoft's just finished a proof of concept where they put some of their servers underwater to manage the impact of that. But I guess holistically, if I listen to your question, you can use tech to really monitor emissions, impact emissions. You can use tech to do trend analysis, outcome analysis, to predict what's going to happen, which really empowers people to do proactive analysis.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because Sean and I work a lot together, obviously bringing in two disciplines.
Tell me more about that.
The ESG, the sustainability sort of disciplines, mixing with the tech. And there is a lot of expectation, there is a lot of potential, but you have to just go back to the basics. And we speak about, the fact that we need very clear data dictionaries, we need alignments and consistency around what different data sources we're going to use, what different definitions exactly. And so there is huge potential. People speak a lot about AI. We're using AI now to, analyze reports, identify risks of greenwashing, to very quickly identify where there's gaps against some of the emerging standards that we're seeing. But at the same time, if you don't have the basic sort of data architecture, data structure,
you're not
going to get anywhere. Yeah.
Unpack that a little bit for me, Sean. The importance of actually understanding, because I've picked up that maybe how it's interpreted across industries, it could mean different things, but how important is it to set a foundation for data analytics or just data?
Absolutely, couldn't underestimate the impact required. What we see is organizations scale too quickly, end up with data all over the place. Auditability, referenceability becomes a problem. And what we really prefer is exactly what Kaman said. Start with the basics, understand your use cases, understand what the common data points on those use cases, and then build a series of processes associated with it. Is ESG platform-led or is it process-led? I think typically we find, actually we were talking about a client this morning where they've implemented this incredible tool, but they're not getting value out of it because they haven't laid the foundations first. So what are the foundations? Understand your outcomes, understand the use cases, map the data, govern the data, and then implement the tools.
The mass push, especially in South Africa, to get students, whether it's old people that need to upskill within their jobs or young graduates, to sort of pick the right courses that are going to set them on par for the next 20 to 50 years. How important is skills development, and what impact do you see ESG, climate change, and data tech having on the type of skills that are now going to be needed for the future industry of work?
In the tech space, the biggest skill is problem solving.
Okay.
And problem solving specifically in the context of data. And I think if you look at AI, if you look at generative AI, there's a massive shift around being able to understand the problem statement, because the tools will actually do the problem solving in the future. So that's a big push for us, is how you equip upcoming youth with just that ability to solve a problem.
Yeah. Look, so ESG, sustainability, climate change, they are fundamentally multidisciplinary challenges. So you need accountants, you need climate scientists, you need tech people, you need people that understand HR and training, and you need to bring all of those skills together to find the solutions. So the ability to have these individuals come together, but also to ensure that they've got the right skills so they can connect and work together, in my mind, is the biggest challenge that we have. And I think that's where organizations are finding, even across their marketing departments, their procurement departments, HR, sustainability and finance teams, they all still speak relatively different languages, and they need to start aligning to solve for these bigger issues. And so that's really, I think, one of the biggest challenges, but one of the most exciting areas in terms of skills development.
How would you now, looking in the next 20 years ahead, how do you see the future workplace transforming? Because these are new systems, new adoptions, in South Africa. What are some of the most drastic changes that you see happening in terms of what the workplace environment is going to be like, or what,
Good question, and I guess it depends on how you look at the problem statement. But in the growing world, I think you work anywhere, anytime, any place. So one of the biggest shifts is actually we did a podcast this morning around this benefit of flexible life, right? And flexible life, at its simplest point, actually means being able to put a load of washing on in the morning, instead of having to have it done in the evening. Talking about multi-skills, you're no longer going to be pre-described on a role and a position. It's going to be the skills that you bring to that position. So I guess my prediction is working anytime, anywhere, with a really multifaceted skills base.
Yeah, I think, look, the new generations, and I feel old sometimes working with my team, and I don't think even that old, but I have a completely different view of what work needs to be, which I think is a very healthy thing. And obviously ESG on a certain level is all about how do we change business, the private sector, to be a lot more sustainable, to contribute a lot more positively to society, to the environment. So I think my hope certainly is that some of the digitization that we're seeing, some of these shifts in terms of, people being a lot more flexible in terms of the skills, bringing that multidisciplinary will mean that it will just be a much more fulfilling place that has a lot more opportunities. I think the reality is it's probably going to feel a bit unstable for the next couple of years. There's a lot of talk about, these just transition processes that we need to go where, people that are mining coal now need to reskill and go into new industries. There are significant opportunities, but there will be some pain along the way. So I think it's about how we manage those transitions in a very responsible way.
And I think we mustn't forget one of the key components of ESG is the impact on the societies we work from.
Tell me about that.
And as organizations really need to think beyond the numbers and how do you equip the youth, how do you skill your staff, and how do you support the societies in which you operate.
Last question, and it comes from this conversation. Where are we in South Africa in comparison to the rest of the world with regards to our adoption of ESG tech-infused in environments in the workplace?
The Presidential Climate Commission just released, I think, their State of Climate report, climate action report this morning. And it notes South Africa is the 15th largest emitter of emissions in the world. So, as a country, we contribute quite significantly. And we have ambitious commitments, but obviously we know that there has been challenges in terms of rollout of renewables and things like that. So I think, there is still a way to go, that's clear, and we definitely need to speed up our action. I think in certain areas also the opportunity is there, and if we speed it up, we will get there. Having said that, I'm French, but I've been in South Africa for 15 years. I think we always underestimate the enthusiasm, the entrepreneurial spirit that there is in South Africa.
What makes you say that?
Well, the thing is, in Europe and the US, lots of things are established, but people they don't go out and make a plan, and they just kind of expect that things will come their way. And if you look at the, super challenging socioeconomic, environmental context of South Africa, I think companies that have succeeded are just so much more resilient than, companies in Europe. I see my dad in Europe with his, banking apps where he's got this other thing, and I can do everything from my phone in an instant. That innovation spirit and that sort of potential to leapfrog, I fully believe that, in some ways we might be behind, but we've got everything that we need to be ahead.
Sean, your last sentiment, just adding on to that.
Yeah, I think I couldn't reiterate what you said. Don't underestimate the entrepreneurial spirit of the country we live in. And what we've already seen from a lot of organizations to get ahead of the ball when it relates to ESG. And that goes very well. And a lot of it's actually got to do with the passion to do the right thing in the societies as opposed to because the government's forum says it.
Exactly.
So I think watch this space. It could be quite different in a few years' time.
Thank you guys so much.